Welcome to my introduction to civilization, rather mega civilization. In this board game, which is quite large, 5 to 18 players will battle it out over 8,000 years of history, from the Stone Age up to the end of the Iron Age. This game is designed by Haan and John Rodriguez, and it's a reworking of the original Civilization game by Avalon Hill. The game's a game of colonization, civ building, trade, and warfare. The winner will be the civilization who can gather the most victory points from building cities and buying advances. In Megasiv, each player leads an ancient civilization through expansion, calamities, warfare, city building, negotiation, and most importantly, trade. The game takes place in turns that are divided into phases. Broadly, the phases allow the players to grow their population, move their units, conduct warfare, build cities, receive and trade commodities, deal with calamities that may arise, buy civilization advances, and move up on the Archaeological Succession Table. The Archaeological Succession Table, or AST, is a board that depicts each civilization's journey through history. So this is the AST, or Archaeological Succession Table. And basically each civilization is going to navigate this board, and as you start here, depending on your civilization, so it's 1 to 18, and you have a little marker that starts here, and as it moves over, you're going to enter into new eras, new ages. The kind of requirements are written up here. So in the Stone Age, there's no requirement. And then to enter into the early Bronze Age, you need 2 cities. And to enter and keep moving up, I guess, into the Middle Bronze Age, you need 3 cities and 3 civilization advances. Late Bronze Age, you need 3 cities and 3 civilization advances that are each worth 100 or more. Early Iron Age, you need 4 cities and 2 advances that are each worth 200 or more. And finally, to reach this last point on here, you need 5 cities and 3 civilization advances, each worth 200 or more. There's a turn marker along the bottom, and there's also victory points it's 5 every spot you move up on there. If you ever have 0 cities, once you're in past the Stone Age, at the end of the turn you move backwards. And if you don't have the minimum, so say you're in the early Bronze Age and only have 1 city, you would freeze on there, and you wouldn't move forward. You also can't cross into the next age without the requirement, so your little marker would stay stuck there. This is the Census Track, and it keeps track of which civilization has how many units on the board. And this comes into play during some of the phases that'll have to do with the order that people take their turns in. Alright, we're going to briefly talk about setup. The board that gets put out, as you can see here, has 4 of these big panels, and depending on the number of players is how many panels you use. So with a 5-player game you use 1, and all the way up to the 18-player game you use all 4 pieces. The rulebook goes into quite a bit of detail about how to set that up and how many for each player and all sorts of stuff, so it's best just to follow through that depending on the number of players you have. On setup, each player is going to receive a player mat and the tokens to go with one of the nations. As you can see here, the player mat's broken up into a treasury, which right now is empty for this player, and a stock, which has all the other pieces on it. And there's also a sequence of play here. Those who have played Advanced Civilization before will notice that there's a few less phases, and that's just because some of the phases have been mixed together. The little population tokens, these little guys here, little units, on one side they have a face or a symbol of some sort, and the other side they have this symbol, and you can see it's kind of pots for these guys. Whenever you gain money, and we'll talk about that in a bit when we talk about the sequence of play, you take units from your stock and you put them into your treasury flipped over. So if you got $2, it would go in like that. There will be 4 boats and 9 cities, but I just put some in here to show you that. Each player also put one of their tokens on the starting track of the AST, and one down here to show they have 1 to 12 units. Alright, now we're going to talk about the sequence of play, starting with the first phase, which is tax collection. I've removed a lot of the little pieces right now, just to show how this works. Basically, for every city you have, and this character has 2, you would get $2 into your treasury. So that would convert these guys to money, like that. It should be noted that if this person had another city, so if they had 3 on the board, and they didn't have enough units to convert them to treasury, there's a tax revolt. And I'm not going to go into exactly what happens, but it's quite bad. You mitigate that by kind of spending your tax money later in the turn, and just making sure you always have some units in stock available. The next phase is population expansion, and this is where new population is put onto the board. So each unit kind of spawns another unit. If you have 2 units in one region, they spawn 2 more. However, if you have 3 or more in a spot, they only spawn 2 more. They never kind of keep growing past 2. So for this character, or this nation's population expansion, it would be 1 for 1, 1 for 1, 2 up here, and just 2 where there's 3, because you can't be more than that. You'll also notice there's these little numbers on the regions. That's how many population that region can support. So right now in this number 1 spot, it can only support 1 of these units. However, before you have to worry about that, you get a chance to move around the board. It should also be noticed in this phase, you count all your units. So there'd be 8, 13 for this player. They would mark that on the census track. The next phase of the game is the movement phase. In this phase, you move your units, and you also build ships if you would like. In the old Civilization game, there are 2 separate steps. You had to kind of plan out your movements with your ships beforehand and then have them ready for the movement phase. In this game, it can just happen as you're moving. At the start of the game, each unit can only move 1, so he could move there, for instance. But as you go on, there are things you can do to allow you to move further than 1. Each unit moves 1, so these guys are overpopulated right now, so he'd move here, for example, and maybe this guy would move here, and maybe we don't want to move anybody else. Now, just resetting here, or I'll kind of reset there. If you wanted to move some units by boat, you have to purchase a boat. And you can either purchase a boat, and that's these little things here. You can either, it costs 2, and you can either take 2 out of your population, or you can pay using the treasury that we talked about earlier. If you pay with treasury, you can put the boats wherever you'd like. If you pay with population, it has to be where the boats need, or it has to come from the place where the population is coming from. We'll say we already had this boat here, so we would use it to transport people. Each boat can hold up to four units, and it can move to 4 spaces. The units, their movement is used up getting on and getting off the boat. They don't get to move again when they get off. So this could take these 4 units and move them 1, 2, 3 over to here, for example. Or maybe on the way it would drop a couple off here and a couple here, or 1 guy there. You can't go through these kind of open water until you get specific technology. There's also technology that allows you to move boats further than that. If you leave your units in spots that have enemies, there'll be a conflict, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. Alright, so as we see, the green player and the orange player are contesting this location here, which is a 2. If there are ever units coexisting there from different nations and it's higher, their total is higher than what the number is, so in this case 2, a conflict will happen until the number of units gets down to that number. So for example, in this 3 spot, if this was how it was, these guys would not battle because it can support 3 units. Combat's deterministic in nature. The nation with the fewer units loses its units first, and then it's basically back and forth loss of units. So it'd be one gone, one gone, one gone, the conflict's over, and we're at 2. We'll try that over here just so you can see what would happen. So same thing, there's only 2 orange units, so it'd be one gone, and now we're at 3, so they would coexist. What this also means is that, say for example you attacked with 3 against 1 in this space, the defender would lose the 1 unit, and these 3 they'd be done, there'd be no losses. It also should be noted that if you attack a city, we'll just pretend that's an orange city, you would need at least 7 units to attack it. If you attack with any less, your entire force just disappears, and then this city is replaced by 5 troops, and it's sort of that back and forth thing again. The next phase is the city construction phase. City construction occurs when you have 6 or more units in a space and they are converted into a city. They go back into your stock and it's replaced by a city token. That's in a spot that has one of these little symbols. You can build it in a spot that doesn't have a symbol, but it would cost you 12 or more. So once you're happy with the cities you've built, you remove any excess population in areas that can't support them. So in this case, they can only have 1 here, so this would be lost back to your stock. But these other 2 spots are fine. And then you do city support check. And what that means is each city needs 2 units to support it on the board. So we only have 1 city, and we have 5 units, so we're good. But if we had 3 cities, we would have to get rid of 1 because we only have 5 units. The next phase is trade card acquisition. I'm not going to go through exactly how that works here, but basically you'll get 1 trade card of each value depending on how many cities you have. So if you had 4 cities, you'd get a number 1 value, number 2 value, number 3 value, number 4 value. There's some stuff to go along with that, but we're not going to get into it right now. You can also purchase number 9 value commodities for 15 treasuries units. Once you have your trade cards, there begins the trade phase. And that's a timed phase, usually kind of 8 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever your group decides on, in which you trade with other players. So if this was your hand, your trade must be 3 cards, and you must be truthful about 2 of them. So perhaps this player wants to get more ochre, which is, well, the worst commodity in the game, but anyways, we'll just pretend that's what they want. And they say, I have some iron and fish to... Or they might say I have some fish and wool because those are the better commodities. Does anybody want that in exchange for some ochre? And so another player says, yeah, I can give you 2 ochre for that and something else. So they decide to trade. So this player gives these 2 cards, which they're telling truth about, and they hadn't mentioned this card, so these are the cards they trade away. And then they receive an ochre, great, an ochre, great, and then, civil disorder, which is a calamity card. So when you receive a calamity card, we'll talk about that in the next phase. Right now it's just sort of in your hand, and so you can use that as something you want to try and give to somebody else. It should be noted you can never mention that you are trading a calamity. So you can't say, I'll give you 2 really good cards, but I'm going to give you a calamity with it. I mean, everybody knows there's going to be calamities being traded around, but you're not allowed to specifically mention them. So once the trading phase comes to an end, we will move on to the next phase. Right, the next phase is the calamity selection phase. In this phase, you will get rid of any excess calamities you have. So you're allowed to have 3 minor ones. Well, 3 calamities in total, but only 2 of them can be major. And that's sort of down here, I'll say, whether it's major or minor. Some of them can and can't be traded. Those will be covered in your first game. It's probably easier just to let that play out. And so you select which ones you get. If you say, for example, you had 5 minor calamities, you would shuffle them up and throw out 2, because you're going to be affected by 3. Also, if you have any doubles, which is possible in the larger games, you would throw out the double. The next phase is the Calamity resolution phase. In this phase, each player who has a Calamity will resolve that. A lot of the calamities affect more than one person, so there'll be sort of a primary and then a secondary victim. There could be a beneficiary. So, for example, if your civilization is being broken into two, there would be a beneficiary of those extra people that are splitting off from your civilization. I'm not going to talk about all the different ones here. Needless to say, they can be very bad, and you could have a very lasting effect on the game. The next phase is the special abilities phase. Basically, some advances give special abilities, and those are resolved at this time. And finally, remove surplus population again, and check city support again, because that could have been affected from the calamities. And then you can buy civilization cards. So there's lots of different civilization advances that you use your trade cards to buy. I'll just show you a trade card again here. So if you notice on the bottom there's some numbers. That is what the value right at. And you can use those to buy advances. And finally you move up on the AST, if you have the proper requirements. If you have no cities, you move down it, and if you don't have the requirements to move forward, you are stuck there. And that's basically how the game works. You kind of win or lose based on how well you can trade, and the warfare and stuff like that is important, but ultimately it's the trade cards that win you the game. This overview wouldn't have given you much insight into kind of how the trading works and sort of the fun that occurs as you sort of negotiate with the other players. But I hope it gives you an idea of how the game works, so that when you sit down for your first game, you can be a little more ready than you would normally be. Alright, thanks for watching.